We have been actively looking for connections to ongoing events in the world, and in doing this we have conducted a number of interviews and stories from normal sane people whom has become connected to the pattern. Here is a troubling story from Portland, Oregon. This is what happened to me a couple nights ago. I was encouraged to share my story by friends who tell me people need to know what I've experienced. I recently moved into a condo in southeast Portland. Outside of downtown, it's pretty rural here and there are more houses and condos than apartment complexes. I was out on my balcony smoking a cigarette when I noticed something strange. Now I'll preface this by saying I have heard of black-eyed kids, children, and people, whatever. I don't usually get spooked by scary stories or creepy pastas. They are all fun and games, right? No harm. I have had weird things happen to me I can't explain, don't get me wrong. My boyfriend swears I was possessed once. I had an object thrown at me by no one when I was alone in a basement. Paranormal weirdness that I don't bother much to try and understand. I dismiss it and go on with my life. I never believed I'd be writing something like this on a site like this. I'm a graduate student on a professional track and I stay pretty firmly grounded in scientific and reasonable explanations. Whether I know what they are or not, I favor the belief they underlying everything. Okay, so on my balcony smoking. Across the condo complex on a neighbor's balcony I see two silhouettes. It's late, around 2 a.m. and it's a weeknight. One was slightly taller than the other, but they looked to be females around the age of 8 to 12 with one a bit older. I saw movement and the two stood close to one another and I could hear them knocking on this second-story balcony door. My light was off, so aside from my cigarette burning I don't think anyone could see me well enough to know I was there, and once I saw them I was frozen still. I don't know why, but as soon as I could make out their shapes I felt an overwhelming sense of terror. Like something imminent and dangerous was preying on me and I couldn't move. After some time, 10 minutes of paralyzing fear and listening to their knocks, the light in the condo came on and someone opened their blinds. I was afraid for them. I wanted to yell to the neighbor to stop, but I was more afraid they'd see me, and I can't explain it, but I knew I didn't want them to know I was watching. The neighbor stepped back, I think confused and apprehensive. I could understand why. I heard the voice of the older, taller one, and it's burned in my mind. It was completely accentless and seemed to be void of any life or cheer. Like a kid is usually happy sounding even if they aren't happy, but it was so weird. I knew it wasn't the voice of a child, or a person. It wasn't human, something in this voice was wrong. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying, but at one point the smaller one turned around and stared straight at me like she knew I was there the whole time. I wanted to pee myself. Still paralyzed with fear, I couldn't move. I saw pale skin and huge black eyes. It was dark, it was far, but I know what I saw. When she turned, the light from inside the neighbor's balcony shed light on them so I could see well enough to know her eyes were pitch black, her clothes were strange and old, outdated, and she was expressionless. The neighbor had the door open only an inch or two and her hand looked ready to slam it shut. The taller girl became angry and she seemed as though she was going to make her way in through the damn door. The neighbor slammed it and locked it hard. I could hear the fear of that woman with the intensity in which she locked that door. She stepped back from the door, leaving the blinds drawn, and I lost sight of her. They stood before the smaller one, looked up at the taller one. The two looked at each other, said nothing. No communication, and in unison looked toward me, and I broke free of my paralysis to bolt inside and lock the door. Still holding my cigarette with its filter burning at this point. I kept the light off and kept my eyes on their shadowy silhouettes. This is where it gets crazy sounding, and I search desperately for a way to say this that anyone reading can comprehend the sheer shock, terror, and seriousness at what I witnessed with my own two eyes. They dematerialized. I mean, they just turned into almost a swarm of what could have been insects, and disappeared. Swear to God, on my life. I watched the spot where they had been standing for what had to be the longest 60 seconds or so of my life. And I stepped back away from the window in fear of them popping up behind me or something. I was shaking violently and my cat rubbed on my leg meowing in some attempt to console me because he sensed my fear. I noticed my cigarette filter still on my hand was flattened from me pinching it so hard. I looked down at my cat Milo and back outside because I wanted to try and find them. I looked where they were on the porch to see if I'd gone insane temporarily and they were just hiding there or something. They were gone. My neighbor returned to where I could see her in her window. She was on the phone, probably with the police, and that's when I noticed them again, directly above her, on the roof. Just standing above her, holding hands, and they got on their hands and knees. I still was completely gripped by fear and horrified by what I was seeing. Backtrack, since we moved in we have been hearing things on the roof at night. Running back and forth, footsteps, dropping something heavy sounds, which is weird because we are on the second and top floor. We have been arguing with the neighbors who say we are making too much noise during quiet hours of 10:30 to 6 a.m., which we definitely don't. I am always sleeping due to medical school and my boyfriend stays up late but always by himself. We don't have a TV, so he just reads or looks stuff up on his phone. He doesn't stomp around or move furniture. So I always thought it was weird that it sounds like people are walking above us or running or whatever it is, but chalk it up to trees hitting the rooftop and whatnot. So these kids are on the roof somehow, don't know how they could have even gotten up there, and they get on their hands and knees and are moving on top of this lady's roof. It looks like they may have been scratching at it or digging at it, but I could see their black eyes in contrast to their skin with their heads cranked up straight watching me through my window of my balcony door. They were both looking right at me, which was extremely unnerving. I didn't even know what was happening or why. I knew I had to get some kind of proof of what was happening, but I was terrified to take my eyes off them and lose them from view. I knew my phone was plugged into the charger in the kitchen and something in my head said to me, not in my voice, "Don't move, you may not like where you see me next." Like someone was talking to me in my mind. It scared me so much I felt like my heart was going to explode. I wished someone other than my cat was there so I could validate what I saw and ask them to bring me my phone so I didn't lose sight of them but didn't have to take my eyes off them to chance them vanishing. Phone is important, must prove I'm not crazy. I broke our staring match and ran to the kitchen. Just breaking the gaze eased a bit of the terror, but I was still shaking. I grabbed my phone and went back to the window. They stood up in unison. I pulled up my camera and snapped, but the flash reflected on my window and it was a nothing picture. I think it upset them. I was trying to photograph them and again they started disappearing. Like I said earlier, dematerializing or something, because you could see like pieces of them all fading sporadically, lessening into them not being there at all. I stayed looking at the roof, the balconies, even down below, and couldn't see anything or anyone. My neighbor was still on the phone at the door. Her husband or significant other or male roommate was there with her and she was pointing up and talking to either him or whoever was on the phone. She pointed outside and stomped her foot. He was shaking his head in what seemed like disbelief and she passed him the phone and left my line of sight into her condo. I wanted to go out on my balcony but I was still very afraid. I felt wrong, sick to my stomach from the intensity of the experience. I told my boyfriend about it when he came home and he was very freaked out. He has never seen me get upset to literal tears about anything and knows I am a die-hard skeptic of aliens, ghosts, and anything paranormal. I dismiss every photo or video as a hoax and just think with everything anyone can do technology-wise today there has to be a reasonable explanation. Not for this. I'm sorry, but people don't dematerialize and rematerialize. They don't. We aren't there yet and don't think we will be for a long ass time. So what did I see? Anyway, it shook me to my core and I wish the story ends there. The next night I was smoking on my balcony. This was last night. It was earlier than before and this time my boyfriend was home. I felt creeped out but okay to go out with him within scream's reach, so I was going to have a quick cigarette before bed. I was in a robe and slippers, and this time I turned my light on. I sat down and lit my cigarette with the balcony door still open. I took a long drag and exhaled and heard 2 coughs somewhere above me. I knew exactly what it was. I froze and a deep sense of dread boiled up, just like the night before. I threw my cigarette and almost tripped sliding inside the open door. I locked it immediately, at which point my cat began freaking out because he hates being locked out and followed me outside. He was going bananas. Screaming pathetically and frantically, I gave in and opened the door. He bolted inside and I slid it closed and locked it again. I kept the light on and called my boyfriend over. "They are on the roof," I said, and we both got quiet. We heard footsteps above us and his eyes got big. We stood there silent and still, just listening. They sounded like they were heading toward our front door. I ran over to it to double lock it using the top lock, which we always leave open. As soon as I touched it, I felt this cold, creeping, depressing sadness come over me like a wave. And there it was, knock, knock, and knock. They were waiting for me to open my door. I tried to muster up the courage to yell who it is, which came out more like, "Who is there?" Timid and way less courageous sounding than I would have liked. That voice from the prior night, that dead lifeless voice, was being directed at me. "Ma'am, you have to let us in, please help us." I didn't say anything. I wished my door had a peephole, but it doesn't. So I started backing away. Knock, knock, knock. My boyfriend came up behind me and gave me his phone. He said, "We have to get a picture or no one will believe this," softly in my ear. I shook my head knowing he was right and started to approach the door again, hoping to sneak a photo through the high window to the right of the door. When I was just a few steps away, the taller one lifted her face up to the window and shook her head in a disapproving no. The blinds were mostly down, but I could see her face almost entirely with the exception of her lips and chin. Those big black eyes with absolutely no white sclera anywhere, they were huge. Like too big to be human eyes. And there was no way she could reach my window, she had to be floating there to look in, which made me really confused and scared. I had my camera up and ready and snapped the picture without flash, and when I looked at it, her wasn't in it. I am serious. She should have been. I snapped it while she was there. She was still there after I took it, but she wasn't in the picture, guys. I looked back at her soulless, creepy ass face and she somehow smiled without smiling, like, "Haha, you can't prove this happened." I almost wanted to open the door and be like, "What are you?" And that's when it happened again, and my boyfriend saw it too. She just slowly fell apart into nothingness and vanished. The heaviness lifted and my boyfriend and I were like, "What?" He asked if we should open the door and look, and I was like, "Just hold on a second." He asked if I got the picture. I gave him the phone to see for himself. He was like, "No way." What the hell? I don't know what they are, but there is a reason there are no pictures of them that are real. They can't be photographed. Does that mean they exist in another dimension? Or they are dead? Or vampires? I never would believe anyone if I heard my story from anyone else. If it didn't happen to me, there'd be no way I'd give it the time of day. But it did happen to me, and I'm really scared it's going to keep happening, or worse. What do I do? I am so grateful to be alive, but the terror I felt around these girls really has me on edge. I am so scared of going out on my balcony or even leaving my house at night or going to my house. It doesn't feel safe, and I have no way to legitimize what happened or do anything about it. I want answers. I want to know what they are. I want to ask them if I see them again, but it's like I can't even speak around them. I am just almost completely immobilized. How does someone combat something like this? It's like something from a Stephen King novel, but it actually happened. I feel like they are really pissed. I tried to take pictures of them and what is going to happen next, if anything, but I had to get it out somehow because it is real, it does exist, and it's changed everything I've ever thought about paranormal experiences. So scared. I hope they don't ever come back, but I know from hearing things at night they may be here more often than I'd like to believe, and whether I see them or not, they are there, and I have no way to prove it. Really frustrating and soul-shaking. Stay paranoid, my friends.